A single pound of dyed cloth held the exact same market value as a live adult male lion imported for the Roman Colosseum. This was the terrifying economic reality of Tyrian purple, an anomaly of ancient chemistry that funded the greatest maritime empire in human history. Tyrian purple was not just a luxury, it was the absolute apex of localized ancient wealth, fiercely protected by the threat of immediate execution. Mainstream history often presents ancient textiles as rudimentary, subject to rapid decay under the harsh Mediterranean sun. But the physical evidence left behind by the Phoenicians reveals a massive contradiction. They isolated a highly specific biological anomaly, a process involving organobromine compounds and ultraviolet light that defied natural degradation. They didn't simply harvest a plant or crush a mineral. They engineered an industrial-scale photochemical trigger that modern science could not successfully reverse engineer until the dawn of the 20th century. The source of this impossible wealth was not found in a mine or harvested from a rare botanical specimen. It was violently extracted from the hypobranchial gland of specific predatory sea snails, primarily the Bolinus brandaris and Hexaplex trunculus, native to the eastern Mediterranean. The sheer anatomical reality of this extraction process presents a staggering logistical problem. Each individual snail produces only a microscopic yield, a single drop of a clear precursor fluid. To understand the scale of this ancient operation, we must look at the verified data from 1909, when chemist Paul Friedlander finally succeeded in replicating the lost Phoenician process. Through meticulous extraction, Friedlander processed exactly 12,000 Murex snails. From those 12,000 lives, he managed to extract just 1.4 grams of pure pigment. That is barely enough dye to color the trim of a single garment. But here is where the forensic record gets genuinely impossible to explain. We are looking at an engineering problem of exponential scale. To dye a single royal robe, the Phoenicians required the systematic harvesting and processing of hundreds of thousands of individual mollusks. Furthermore, the resulting dye is a brominated indigoid, specifically 6,6'-dibromoindigo. In the realm of biology, organobromine compounds are exceptionally rare. Natural dyes of the ancient world were largely sulfur-based or plant-derived, inherently unstable and prone to rapid fading. Tyrian purple possessed an anomalous chemical property that shocked the ancient mind. It was incredibly color-fast. Even more inexplicably, the pigment actually became brighter, more vibrant, and deeper in hue when exposed to severe weathering and intense sunlight. To the civilizations of antiquity, a color that fed upon the destructive power of the sun was inherently divine. However, the extraction of the raw fluid was only the first step in a complex hidden chemical equation. The raw fluid harvested from the snail is completely clear, sometimes bearing a slight yellowish tint. It does not instantly become purple. The fluid must be subjected to a highly precise photochemical reaction. It requires exposure to specific frequencies of ultraviolet light and oxygen to trigger the enzymatic transformation into the iconic imperial color. If the Phoenician vats were kept in a dark room, the chemical reaction would permanently stall. The color would simply never manifest. The physical proof of this massive industrialization is not hidden. It is scarred directly into the geology of the Levantine coast. In the ancient Phoenician megacities of Tyre and Sidon, situated in modern-day Lebanon, early archaeological excavations did not just find dye vats. They discovered literal mountains of crushed murex shells. The Murex Hill in Sidon is a verified archaeological anomaly. It is a solid, compacted mound of shell fragments estimated to be over 100 feet high and stretching the length of an entire city block. This is not a refuse heap. It is the fossilized footprint of an industrial slaughterhouse operating on a scale that forces us to reevaluate ancient supply chains. Looking at the sheer complexity of extracting this clear fluid and triggering it with ultraviolet light, we have to ask, was this anomalous chemical reaction discovered through centuries of accidental trial and error? Or did the Phoenicians inherit a highly advanced pre-existing knowledge of marine biology? Let me know your stance in the comments below. The forensic reality of the dye production process was severe. The biochemical extraction required the crushed snail glands to steep and ferment in massive vats of highly alkaline, stale urine and salt for up to 10 days. The resulting stench was so catastrophically overpowering that it fundamentally altered the urban planning of the ancient world. Legal edicts strictly forced these massive dye facilities to be positioned downwind of any population centers. The noxious odor was so deeply ingrained into the skin and hair of the workers that ancient Talmudic law contains a specific, verified clause. It explicitly granted women the legal right to divorce their husbands if the man took up the trade of a purple dyer after their marriage. We are looking at a society that willingly restructured its cities, endured biohazardous working conditions, and slaughtered marine life by the millions, all to isolate a few grams of a photochemical compound. The scale of this operation completely shatters the illusion of primitive, localized trade. The geopolitical impact of this biological anomaly cannot be overstated. By the year 301 AD, the Roman Emperor Diocletian issued the Edict on Maximum Prices, a forensic financial document designed to halt rampant inflation across the empire. This document gives us a concrete, verifiable look into the ancient global economy. Diocletian's edict capped the price of 1 single pound of top-tier, double-dipped Tyrian purple silk at 150,000 denarii. As previously mentioned, this was the exact maximum price set for importing a live apex predator from Africa. This was not merely a luxury textile, it was the foundational economic engine of the Phoenician maritime empire. The absolute monopoly on this specific chemical reaction generated the immense, localized wealth required to build the massive shipyards of Tyre. It paid for the legendary timber of Lebanon, and it funded the vast, heavily armed naval fleets that allowed the Phoenicians to dominate the Mediterranean, establish the impregnable mega-city of Carthage, and project their power as far as ancient Britain in search of tin. Yet, despite the Phoenicians' mastery of the process, the archaeological record reveals an even deeper chronological anomaly. The Phoenicians industrialized the chemical reaction, but they were not the original architects. Verified historical data pushes the timeline back significantly. The use of Murex purple dyes began much earlier, around 3000 BC, with the Minoan civilization centered on the island of Crete. Excavations of highly advanced Minoan architectural sites have revealed complex houses decorated with vibrant frescoes that utilized Murex purple directly as a structural paint. Furthermore, researchers have uncovered earthen floors dating back to roughly 1500 BC that contain finely crushed Murex shells acting as a binding aggregate. This is a highly sophisticated ancient example of industrial recycling, proving the Murex extraction process was already a massive, deeply ingrained industry thousands of years before the rise of the Roman Empire. As the knowledge of the dye spread, it rapidly transitioned from a mere indicator of staggering wealth into a strictly enforced, violently protected symbol of divine right. In the Roman period, Murex-dyed fabrics became the ultimate weapon of social control. The Roman elite eventually restricted the chemical compound entirely. Successive emperors enacted draconian sumptuary laws that explicitly banned ordinary citizens from purchasing or even wearing true Tyrian purple. Defying this edict was not a finable offense. It was legally classified as an act of high treason, punishable by immediate execution. The Byzantine Empire later elevated the dye to an almost mythological, untouchable status. Byzantine emperors not only draped themselves in robes of pure Tyrian purple, but they exclusively signed their royal decrees in matching purple ink. This exclusivity was absolute. Children born into the direct imperial bloodline were bestowed the official title of Porphyrogenitus, a term that literally translates to born in the purple. This was not just a symbolic metaphor. Deep within the heavily fortified Great Palace of Constantinople, there existed a highly specific, restricted chamber designated exclusively for royal births. This room was entirely lined from floor to ceiling with porphyry, an exceedingly rare, dyed purple-colored stone quarried from the brutal deserts of Egypt. Here at Ancient Chronicles HD, our mission is to bypass the speculation and analyze the hard, verifiable data of our past. If you are committed to uncovering the true timeline of human engineering and exposing the anomalies that challenge our history books, subscribe and join our pursuit of the evidence. As we track the Mediterranean obsession with this chemical anomaly, we are confronted with a massive geographical contradiction that mainstream archaeology struggles to clearly explain. The extraction of a brominated indigoid from the hypobranchial gland of a specific predatory sea snail, utilizing a precise ultraviolet photochemical reaction, is an incredibly complex multi-stage scientific process. Yet verified evidence proves it was discovered completely independently across the globe. In Mesoamerica, completely isolated from the Mediterranean trade networks by thousands of miles of lethal ocean, indigenous cultures mastered an identical, parallel process. The Huav, Chontal, and Mixtec peoples of Oaxaca, Mexico, traditionally utilized the Purpura pansa sea snail to achieve the exact same vibrant, permanent purple dye for their elite textiles. We are forced to ask how two entirely disconnected empires managed to decode the exact same invisible chemical reaction hidden inside the biology of a sea snail, completely rewriting what we know about ancient civilization secrets. But for the Phoenicians, this anomaly wasn't just a color, it was the funding mechanism for an impossible global expansion. That evidence traces directly back to a fleet of ships that had no business existing, and you can uncover that investigation right now by clicking the video on your screen. Thanks for watching Ancient Chronicles HD. Stay curious,